Letnitsa, a small settlement that became the epicenter of dramatic events of military confrontation. In September 1939, this modest town suddenly acquired colossal strategic importance. Located at the intersection of key railway lines and roads, Letnitsa represented a true transport hub, control over which opened access to supplies and troop movements throughout the region. The Polish command was well aware of this, as was the German General Staff, which developed a plan for the lightning capture of this point. Both sides concentrated significant forces here. The Poles, parts of the Poznan army; the Germans, elements of the 4th Panzer Division and motorized infantry. The air was thick with tension on the eve of the inevitable clash. The calm before the storm. This is how one could characterize the atmosphere in the region, where one of the exemplary battles of the initial stage of the war would soon unfold, becoming a textbook for military strategists around the world. The geographical location of Letnitsa determined its fateful role in the military conflict. Situated in the central part of Poland, at the junction of crucial transport arteries, this small dot on the map transformed into an object of paramount strategic importance. Two main railway lines pass through Letnitsa: the north-south line, connecting the Baltic coast with the industrial regions of Upper Silesia, and the west-east line, linking Germany with the eastern territories of Poland and further with the Soviet Union. At the intersection of these steel paths, a large railway hub formed with an extensive system of depots, marshalling yards, and warehouses. Parallel to the railway tracks ran high-quality motor roads, a rarity for Poland at that time. These concrete arteries allowed for the rapid redeployment of mechanized units, which was crucial in the conditions of mobile warfare. Of particular value were the bridges over the Vistula River, located 20 kilometers from the city, 1 railway and 2 road bridges. Control over them opened up the possibility of rapid troop movement between the eastern and western banks of the river, which served as a natural defensive line. Letnitsa also served as a telegraph and telephone communication hub, allowing for effective coordination of troop actions across a vast region. The hilly terrain around the city created natural observation points, offering views of tens of kilometers of the surrounding area. This made it possible to monitor enemy movements and promptly react to changes in the tactical situation. For the German command, the capture of Letnitsa meant severing the Polish defense into northern and southern parts, followed by the isolation and destruction of scattered enemy groupings. The Polish leadership understood. Holding this transport hub was a matter of life and death for maintaining the integrity of the front. The city became a key logistical center through which troops were supplied, the wounded evacuated, and reserves moved. German aerial reconnaissance recorded intense movement on all roads leading to Letnitsa. Daily, dozens of trains carrying military cargo, fuel, provisions, and ammunition passed through the railway station. Warehouses on the city's outskirts were filled with strategic reserves. In the event of these storage facilities being captured, German forces would gain a significant material advantage. The transport significance of Letnitsa increased manifold under the conditions of the nascent war. The destruction of infrastructure in other regions made every preserved transport hub worth its weight in gold. The Polish command dispatched engineering units to the city to fortify transport facilities and prepare them for defense. By early September 1939, the political situation in Europe had reached a boiling point. Germany, having completed preparations for the invasion of Poland, concentrated powerful strike formations on the border. Particular attention was paid to the Letnitsa area, where the German command planned to deliver one of the key blows to dissect the Polish defenses. The Polish armed forces, anticipating the inevitability of conflict, hastily fortified positions around the strategic transport hub. The 17th Infantry Division of General Kazimierz Sosnkowski, reinforced by 2 tank battalions and an artillery regiment, was deployed in the Letnitsa area. The total strength of the Polish grouping was approximately 12,000 men, with 120 guns of various calibers and 45 light tanks. The Poles were mainly armed with Mauser rifles of the 1898 model, Browning light machine guns, and several dozen Bofors anti-tank rifles. Artillery was represented by 75mm field guns and 105mm howitzers. Tank units were equipped with domestically produced 7 TP light tanks and French Renault R-35s. The German forces aimed at Letnitsa represented a powerful mechanized fist. The 4th Panzer Division of the Wehrmacht, under the command of Major General Georg Hans Reinhardt, numbered approximately 16,000 soldiers, 220 tanks, predominantly PZ-3 and PZ-4, over 300 armored personnel carriers, and about 150 artillery pieces, including the newest 37 and 50mm anti-tank guns. The morale of the warring parties differed significantly. German troops, inspired by successes in Czechoslovakia and propaganda about the invincibility of the Wehrmacht, were full of determination. Many soldiers had combat experience gained in Spain. Polish units, despite patriotic fervor, felt anxiety in the face of a technologically superior enemy. However, the determination to defend their homeland compensated for these fears. The tactical plans of the sides reflected their capabilities and doctrines. The Polish command counted on stubborn defense of key transport hubs, with a subsequent counterattack by reserve forces with Allied support. The German plan envisioned a swift breakthrough with tank wedges, encirclement, and piecemeal destruction of Polish units. In the air, absolute superiority belonged to the Luftwaffe. Against 30 outdated Polish P-7 and P-11 fighters based at an airfield near Letnitsa, the Germans could field over 100 modern Messerschmitt Bf-10-9s and Heinkel He-11-1 bombers. The weather conditions on the eve of the battle favored the attacking side. Clear skies provided ideal visibility for aviation, and dry roads allowed tank columns to move at maximum speed. Tension grew with each passing hour, and both sides understood the battle for Letnica would become one of the defining battles of the initial stage of the war. The dawn of September 1, 1939, was shattered by the roar of artillery. German troops began a massive bombardment of the positions of the Polish 17th Infantry Division, entrenched on the approaches to Letnitsa. The first squadrons of Heinkel bombers appeared over the city, methodically striking the railway junction and warehouses with military equipment. General Sosnkowski, receiving a report on the start of the attack, gave the order not to return artillery fire, conserving precious shells. He understood. The main blow was yet to come. And he was not mistaken. 2 hours after the start of the bombardment, the characteristic silhouettes of German tanks appeared on the horizon, moving in 3 wedges. The Polish defense was echeloned. The first line consisted of camouflaged anti-tank ditches and minefields. Behind them were infantry positions with anti-tank rifles and light artillery. In the rear, on the high ground, the main artillery batteries were deployed. Major Wilhelm Kluge, commander of the advanced German tank battalion, chose classic tactics. Concentrating fire on the central section of the Polish defense, he attempted to breach it. However, Polish artillerymen, waiting for the German tanks to approach an optimal distance, opened accurate fire. The very first volleys knocked out 6 Panzer III vehicles. Realizing that a frontal assault had failed, the German command shifted efforts to the flanks. Using their superiority in mobility, tank companies began a flanking maneuver from the north, where the hilly terrain provided natural cover from Polish artillery. General Soskowski, foreseeing such a development, had already deployed a tank battalion and an anti-tank battery there. A fierce battle ensued, in which Polish tankers on light 7TPs showed exceptional courage, holding back the onslaught of a technically superior enemy. By midday, the situation had become complicated. German motorized infantry managed to infiltrate through gaps in the Polish defense and reach the outskirts of Letnitsa. Street fighting began in the city. Every house, every intersection became a strong point. Polish soldiers, using their knowledge of the terrain, organized an effective defense, inflicting sensitive losses on the attackers. An especially fierce battle unfolded for the railway station, a key object of the entire transport hub. German assault groups, supported by armored personnel carriers, attacked the station building again and again, but the Polish garrison, reinforced by machine gun crews, repelled all attempts to break through. By the evening of the first day of fighting, the situation had stabilized. The Germans managed to gain a foothold on the northern outskirts of the city, but the center and southern districts, including the most important transport facilities, remained under the control of Polish troops. Both sides suffered significant losses and were preparing for the continuation of the battle the next day. The first day of fighting near Letnitsa showed that the Polish army, despite its technical backwardness, was capable of effectively resisting the German blitzkrieg with proper use of terrain and a well-thought-out defense system. However, the question of holding the strategically important transport hub remained open. The forces were unequal, and the advantage was gradually shifting to the aggressor. The 5th day of September 1939 marked a turning point in the Battle of Letnica. After several days of fierce clashes, the struggle concentrated around key transportation facilities. The railway junction, bridges over the river, and highways became the epicenters of bloody battles. The German command realized that capturing the city itself offered no strategic advantage without control over the transport infrastructure. Major General Reinhardt regrouped his tank units, focusing his main efforts on seizing the southern railway depot and the main road bridge. The Polish defenders, under Soskowski's leadership, skillfully utilized the terrain. Every bridge, every crossing, and every station was transformed into a fortified position. Engineering units mined the approaches to strategic objectives, creating an echeloned defense system. The battles for the central marshalling yard became particularly fierce. This complex of a dozen railway tracks, a depot, and warehouses allowed control over all train movements through the region. Polish artillerymen, positioning their guns on heights near the station, accurately destroyed German armored vehicles attempting to break through to the objective. The maneuvering nature of the fighting was fully manifested. The front line shifted several times a day. In the morning, German tank crews might celebrate the capture of a road bridge, only to find themselves pushed back by a Polish counterattack by evening. Such dynamics demanded lightning-fast decisions and flexibility in troop command from both sides' commanders. North of the city, a dramatic struggle unfolded for control over the highway junction, dubbed Death Star by the soldiers. 5 main roads converged at one point, making it critically important for troop movement. In 3 days of fighting, this junction changed hands 4 times, becoming a graveyard for dozens of armored vehicles. The airspace over the transport hubs became an arena for continuous skirmishes. German aviation sought to destroy bridges and railway tracks, while Polish anti-aircraft gunners and a small number of fighters desperately tried to prevent these strikes. black smoke from burning fuel tanks and ammunition depots was visible for tens of kilometers. The battle for control over transportation arteries demanded not only tactical prowess, but also flawless operation of logistical services. The logistical support for operations near Letnica became a true test for both sides amidst a constantly shifting front line. The Polish army initially relied on an extensive network of depots established around the transport hub. The main ammunition and fuel storage facilities were located 3 kilometers south of the city, connected to it by a narrow-gauge railway. The supply system worked relatively stably during the initial days of the battle, but by the 4th day, it encountered critical problems. German aviation systematically destroyed transportation communications. Junkers Ju-87 bombers, with frightening accuracy, destroyed railway tracks and bridges. Polish quartermasters had to organize nighttime deliveries of supplies, using horse-drawn transport and trucks with blacked-out headlights. The expenditure of artillery shells significantly exceeded replenishment capabilities. By the 6th day of fighting, many batteries were forced to conserve every shot. The German side also faced serious challenges. The rapid advance of tank units led to stretched supply lines. Armored vehicles consumed enormous amounts of fuel, and repair services could not keep pace with the operation. The command of the 4th Panzer Division was forced to create special mobile supply groups that followed directly behind the combat formations. A particular difficulty was supplying forward units with water. As they retreated, Polish engineers poisoned many wells, which forced the Germans to deliver drinking water in tankers from German territory. Each such convoy became a target for Polish sabotage groups. Medical support also teetered on the brink of collapse. Polish field hospitals, set up in schools and churches in Letnitsa, were overflowing with wounded. There was a catastrophic shortage of bandages and medicines. German medical services worked more efficiently, but even they could not cope with the influx of casualties from the assault on fortified positions. A decisive factor in the logistical confrontation was the quality of communications. German units maintained reliable radio communication, allowing for prompt redirection of resources to critical areas. Polish command relied primarily on wired communication, which was constantly disrupted by bombings and sabotage. By the 7th day of the battle, the logistical system of the Polish forces was on the verge of complete collapse. Ammunition reserves dwindled to a critical minimum, and fuel for the few armored vehicles ran out. This predetermined the outcome of the struggle for the transport hub, despite the heroic resistance of the defenders. The Battle of Letnitsa vividly demonstrated the increased role of aviation and mechanized units in modern warfare. Germany's air forces seized air superiority from the first hours of the conflict, which significantly affected the course of hostilities. Squadrons of Heinkel and Junkers bombers methodically destroyed Polish communications, while Messerschmitt fighters reliably covered ground units from possible counterattacks by Polish aviation. German aviation tactics were based on the principle of close cooperation with tank wedges. Stuka dive bombers literally paved the way for advancing mechanized columns, suppressing pockets of resistance and demoralizing the defenders. Polish air forces, despite the bravery of their pilots, could not effectively withstand a technologically superior enemy. Outdated P-7 and P-11 fighters were inferior to German machines in speed, maneuverability, and armament. By the 3rd day of the battle, most Polish aircraft had been destroyed on the ground or in unequal aerial combat. Armored units proved to be a true instrument of maneuver warfare. The German 4th Panzer Division employed the classic tactic of a concentrated strike. Tank battalions, formed into wedges, broke through defenses in narrow sections, then widened the breaches and developed the offensive in depth. Motorized infantry on armored personnel carriers followed directly behind the tanks, consolidating the achieved success. Mobile artillery units provided fire support, moving with the advanced units. Polish armored units, despite quantitative and qualitative inferiority, demonstrated flexibility of tactical thinking. Unable to confront German tank masses in open battle, Polish commanders used their few 7 TP tanks as a mobile reserve. Small tank groups launched sudden counterattacks on the flanks of advancing German columns, then quickly retreated to new positions. This tactic allowed them to hinder the enemy's advance, forcing them to divert significant forces to protect flanks and communications. A comparative analysis of the use of mechanized units by both sides reveals fundamental differences in approaches. The German army applied the concept of massive use of tanks as an independent striking force, capable of solving strategic tasks. The Polish command viewed armored vehicles primarily as a means of infantry support. This difference in military doctrine largely predetermined the outcome of the battle. Particularly illustrative was the episode of the struggle for the Letnitsa railway junction, when a German tank company made a rapid 40-kilometer forced march, bypassing the main Polish positions, and unexpectedly attacked the station from the rear, while Polish tanks were scattered in small groups along the entire defense line. The maneuverable nature of the fighting near Letnica also demonstrated the importance of reliable communication between different branches of service. German tank units were equipped with modern radios, allowing them to coordinate actions in real time. Polish mechanized units often relied on messengers, which critically slowed down their reaction to changes in the tactical situation. The lessons of Letnica were carefully studied by military theorists of all leading powers. The battle convincingly showed that the future belongs to mobile, well-coordinated mechanized units operating in close cooperation with aviation. Old ideas about positional warfare had finally become a thing of the past. Behind every great battle stand not only strategic plans and technical capabilities, but also people, from generals to rank-and-file soldiers. The Battle of Letnica vividly demonstrated how critical the human factor can be in conditions of intense maneuver warfare. The commander of the Polish forces, General Sosnkowski, proved to be a flexible tactician. In critical moments, he personally visited the front lines, assessing the situation and boosting troop morale. His decision to concentrate artillery on the high ground controlling approaches to transport hubs allowed for the most effective use of limited resources. Soldiers saw their general under enemy fire, which greatly reinforced their resolve. German Major General Reinhardt adhered to a different command tactic. Situated in a mobile headquarters several kilometers from the front line, he relied on precise intelligence and modern communication tools. This provided a colder, more calculated approach to troop management, but sometimes led to delayed reactions to rapidly changing situations. The officer corps of both sides demonstrated high professionalism. Polish mid-level commanders, often inferior to their German counterparts in technical equipment, compensated for this with a deep knowledge of the terrain and initiative. German officers acted according to clear algorithms, honed in exercises, which ensured the coordinated actions of the entire Wehrmacht war machine. The morale of the troops fluctuated with the front line. In the first days of the battle, Polish soldiers were encouraged by the successful repulsion of German attacks. Every knocked-out tank, every downed aircraft was perceived as proof of the possibility of victory. However, by the fifth day of fighting, when the absence of promised aid from Western allies became evident, signs of demoralization began to appear. German troops also experienced psychological difficulties. Expecting an easy stroll through Poland, they encountered fierce resistance. Losses in equipment and personnel turned out to be higher than predicted. Letters from German soldiers found later testify to growing tension and fatigue. Night counterattacks by Polish units were particularly difficult to bear. Sudden, swift, accompanied by shouts of "Hurrah!" They caused panic even among experienced Wehrmacht soldiers. Heavy losses on both sides became a serious test for the psychological stability of the troops. By the seventh day of the battle, some Polish companies had lost up to 60% of their personnel. German tank crews, seeing their comrades' vehicles burning, also experienced growing anxiety. The 8th of September 1939 marked the culmination of the battle for Letnitsa. After a week of exhausting fighting, both sides approached the decisive moment, depleted but resolute. The transportation hub, initially the objective of the operation, transformed into a symbolic arena for the confrontation of two military doctrines. At dawn, the German command made a final attempt to turn the tide. Major General Reinhardt gathered all remaining tank reserves, approximately 45 vehicles, and directed them as a unified fist against the southern flank of the Polish defense. Simultaneously, a powerful artillery group opened hurricane fire on the central railway depot, the last key objective remaining under Polish control. General Sostkowski, anticipating such a development, had prepared a cunning trap. By withdrawing most of his forces from the depot, he created the illusion of weakened defenses for the Germans. When the first Panzer IV tanks broke into the railway hub, camouflaged Polish anti-tank guns opened flanking fire from a distance of less than 300 meters. The result was devastating. 11 German tanks were knocked out in the first few minutes. The remaining vehicles found themselves trapped in narrow passages between wagons and buildings. Fierce, close-quarters combat ensued, in which Polish soldiers used bundles of grenades and Molotov cocktails. Black smoke from burning tanks engulfed the entire depot, turning it into a semblance of hell on earth. At this critical moment, Reinhardt made a risky decision. He committed his last reserve to battle, a motorized infantry battalion reinforced with sapper groups. Bypassing the depot from the east, these units struck the rear of the Polish artillerymen. Hand-to-hand combat erupted for every position, for every gun. Sostkowski, from his observation post, saw the scales gradually tipping against his soldiers. Realizing that holding the depot was no longer possible, he gave the order for an organized retreat, simultaneously implementing a pre-prepared plan, the demolition of key elements of the transport infrastructure. At noon, a series of powerful explosions thundered. One after another, bridges over the river, sorting stations, water towers, and locomotive turntables were blown sky-high. What could not be held, Polish engineers methodically destroyed, depriving the enemy of the fruits of victory. German tank crews, finally breaking through to the center of the transport hub, found only smoking ruins. Letnitsa's strategic value as a transport center was practically destroyed. By the evening of September 8th, the fighting began to subside. Polish units retreated eastward in an organized manner, carrying their wounded and evacuating surviving equipment. German forces, having suffered heavy losses, were unable to organize an effective pursuit. The Battle of Letnitsa effectively ended. The transport hub came under Wehrmacht control, but its infrastructure lay in ruins. This culmination of the battle clearly demonstrated the entire complexity of modern maneuver warfare. Victory went to the side that could concentrate decisive forces at a critical point and display tactical flexibility. However, the price of this victory proved prohibitively high for both sides. The cost of victory at Letnica proved exorbitantly high for both sides. Polish units lost approximately 4,000 men killed and wounded, over a third of their initial complement. The 17th Infantry Division effectively ceased to exist as a combat-ready formation. Of the 45 tanks available at the start of the battle, only 11 survived, with most of them requiring serious repair. The artillery regiment lost 2/3 of its guns, many of which were blown up by the Poles themselves during the retreat to prevent their capture by the enemy. German losses also proved significant. Approximately 2,800 men were put out of action. The 4th Panzer Division was short 87 tanks and over 100 armored personnel carriers. Particularly sensitive were the losses in officer personnel. 22 officers perished, including 2 battalion commanders. The Luftwaffe lost 14 aircraft over Letnitsa, mainly due to intense anti-aircraft fire during assaults on fortified positions. Material damage to the transport infrastructure was catastrophic. All 3 bridges across the river were completely destroyed. The railway track for 20 kilometers turned into a chaotic pile of twisted metal. The central marshalling yard, depot, and repair workshops lay in ruins. Water towers, essential for fueling steam locomotives, were blown up. Signaling equipment and switch points were annihilated. Telegraph and telephone communications in the region were completely paralyzed. German engineering units estimated that restoring minimal functionality to the transport hub would require at least 3 weeks of intensive work. Full restoration of the infrastructure to pre-war levels could take from 6 months to a year. This significantly slowed the advance of German troops in the eastern direction and disrupted blitzkrieg plans. The long-term strategic consequences of Letnica's destruction proved highly significant. The German command was forced to divert considerable material and human resources to restoring transport communications instead of using them at the front. The supply of forward Wehrmacht units became significantly more complicated, leading to a slowdown in the pace of the offensive in key areas. For the Polish side, the loss of Letnica meant the severance of strategically important communication lines between the northern and southern groupings of troops. This significantly hampered coordination of actions and redeployment of forces. However, the very fact of stubborn resistance and inflicting serious losses on the enemy had enormous moral significance. Of particular value was the experience of conducting combat operations in the struggle for transport hubs. Military analysts from all countries carefully studied the tactical methods used at Letnica. It became clear that in modern warfare, control over transport infrastructure is no less important than the capture of territory. The battle demonstrated the effectiveness of advanced mining and preparation for the destruction of strategic objects if they could not be held. After a week of fierce fighting, the Polish command began a meticulous analysis of the Battle of Letnitsa. Despite the tactical defeat, the strategic lessons of this battle proved to be of immense value for military theory. General Sosnkowski, who led the defense of the transport hub, prepared a detailed report that became the basis for a rethinking of Polish defensive doctrine. The first and most obvious mistake acknowledged by the Polish General Staff was the dispersal of armored forces. Instead of concentrating tanks in decisive directions, the Polish command distributed them in small groups along the entire front. As a result, nowhere was it possible to create sufficient firepower density to repel German tank wedges. Colonel Tadeusz Kospot-Pawłowski, who commanded the artillery in the Battle of Letnitsa, noted in his report, "We underestimated the importance of mobile anti-tank reserves. Static firing points were quickly identified by the enemy and suppressed by aviation. It is necessary to create maneuverable artillery groups capable of rapidly changing positions. Particular attention in the Polish analysis was paid to the defense of transport hubs. Major of the engineering troops Kazimierz Szponarski emphasized, "We correctly identified key infrastructure objects and prepared them for destruction. However, the demolition should have been carried out earlier without waiting for the critical moment. This would have allowed us to save more personnel and equipment." Polish strategists acknowledged a fatal underestimation of the role of aviation in modern warfare. Outdated P-7 and P-11 fighters could not stand against German Messerschmitts. The lack of air cover made any ground operations extremely vulnerable. General Kutscheba, analyzing the experience of Letnitsa, formulated the principles of defending transport hubs, which subsequently became classics of military theory. Defense must be echeloned, with pre-prepared fallback lines. It is necessary to create false targets that divert the enemy's attention from critically important objects. Each hub must have autonomous supplies, allowing it to continue resistance in conditions of encirclement. The Polish command learned valuable lessons from the organization of communications. Excessive reliance on wired communications made troop control extremely vulnerable. In the future, it was proposed to give paramount attention to the development of radio communications at all levels of command. The study of the Letnitsa experience led to a rethinking of the entire concept of territorial defense. It became obvious that in conditions of maneuver warfare, holding static defense lines was hopeless. Instead, it was proposed to create mobile groups capable of rapidly concentrating in threatened directions and counterattacking the flanks of the advancing enemy. The German command meticulously studied the experience of the Battle of Letnitsa, drawing valuable lessons for future campaigns. Major General Reinhardt, who led the operation, submitted a detailed report to the Army High Command, which aroused keen interest among the highest military leadership of the Third Reich. First and foremost, German analysts noted the unexpectedly high effectiveness of the Polish defense of transport hubs. General Guderian, one of the main ideologists of tank warfare, commented on the situation as follows: "The experience of Letnitsa shows that even a technologically inferior enemy, skillfully using the features of the terrain and infrastructure, is capable of significantly slowing down the advance of our tank wedges." Particular attention was paid to the issues of interaction between different branches of the armed forces. Colonel Walter Model, analyzing the course of the battle, pointed to the need for closer coordination between tank units and aviation. "We lost precious time waiting for the arrival of dive bombers to suppress identified strongpoints. It is necessary to develop a more flexible targeting system and reduce the Luftwaffe's reaction time to requests from ground commanders." The study of Polish tactics of mining and destroying transport infrastructure led to a revision of offensive priorities. Lieutenant General Erich von Manstein proposed allocating special advanced capture groups, whose task would be to swiftly seize bridges, railway stations, and other key facilities before the enemy could destroy them. German engineering units gained valuable experience in restoring the destroyed transport network. Colonel Hans Jürgen of the engineering troops noted, "We underestimated the scale of possible destruction and did not have ready-made solutions for the rapid restoration of railway tracks and bridges. In future operations, it is necessary to include mobile engineering groups with ready-made prefabricated structures in the advanced units." Analysis of losses in tank units led to a revision of tactics for using armored vehicles in urban environments. It was recognized that tanks without reliable infantry cover become easy prey for anti-tank groups armed with grenades and Molotov cocktails. This led to the development of new tactical schemes for urban combat. providing for closer interaction between tanks and infantry. The experience of Letnitsa also influenced the further development of German armored vehicles. Engineers who studied damaged vehicles noted insufficient protection of the bottom and ventilation openings. As a result, design changes were made to the new modifications of the Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks. The German command drew important conclusions regarding the pace of the offensive. General Keitel noted, "Letnitsa showed the danger of excessive stretching of communications. Tank wedges that break far ahead become vulnerable to enemy counterattacks. It is necessary to more carefully coordinate the pace of advance of armored and infantry formations." The experience gained was immediately integrated into the training program for Wehrmacht officers. In military academies, the Battle of Letnitsa became a mandatory element of the curriculum, and the tactical decisions made by both sides were analyzed in detail during staff games and field exercises. Russian military theorists closely observed the course of the Battle of Letnica, drawing valuable lessons for their own military doctrine. Despite formal neutrality in this conflict, the Soviet command sent a group of general staff officers to gather intelligence and subsequently analyze the combat operations. Colonel Ivan Bagramyan, who headed the analytical group, prepared an extensive report that later became the basis for revising the tactical directives of the Red Army. The flexibility of the Allied forces in constantly changing conditions made a particular impression on the Russian observers. Major General Rokossovsky noted, "Polish units demonstrated an amazing ability to adapt to the enemy's tactics. When direct confrontation with tank wedges proved impossible, they immediately switched to a maneuver defense using natural obstacles and engineering structures." Soviet military theorists were particularly interested in methods of countering armored vehicles in conditions of limited resources. Colonel Vasily Chuikov, analyzing the tactics of Polish anti-tank groups, wrote, "Small mobile units armed with anti-tank rifles and grenades, when properly using the terrain, are capable of effectively deterring the advance of enemy mechanized units." This observation subsequently formed the basis of the Soviet concept of anti-tank destroyer reserves. Russian engineering specialists highly appreciated the Polish tactics of mining transport hubs. Lieutenant General of Engineer Troops Dmitry Karbyshev noted, "The system of echeloned mining using booby traps and delayed detonation significantly hinders the enemy's advance and forces him to disperse forces for demining." Much attention in the Russian analysis was paid to the role of aviation. Soviet observers noted the catastrophic consequences of losing control over airspace. Major General of Aviation Novikov's report stated, "Without reliable air cover, even well-fortified positions are quickly suppressed by combined strikes of enemy aviation and artillery." This conclusion led to a revision of priorities in the development of the Soviet Air Force. The study of the experience of maneuver battles near Letnitsa had a significant impact on the development of Soviet military theory. Marshal Shaposhnikov, analyzing the actions of the Polish command, emphasized, "The main lesson of Letnitsa is the need to maintain flexibility of control in a dynamically changing environment. Rigid, inflexible plans inevitably fail when confronted with the reality of modern warfare." Russian military theorists noted the importance of psychological preparation of troops for combat operations in conditions of a constantly changing front line. Colonel of the Medical Service Burdenko, who studied the psychological state of the battle participants, wrote, "Uncertainty and frequent movements cause anxiety and disorientation in unprepared soldiers. It is necessary to specially train troops for actions in conditions of maneuver combat." While Polish and German strategists analyzed the lessons of Letnitsa, French and British military analysts also carefully studied this battle. For the Western Allies, the battle for the transport hub became a true revelation, forcing them to reconsider many established concepts of warfare. General Maurice Gamelin, Commander-in-Chief of the French Armed Forces, tasked a special commission with a detailed analysis of all aspects of this clash. The British War Office sent a group of officers to Poland to gather first-hand information. The collected materials formed the basis of a secret report, codenamed the Transport Factor. French analysts were particularly struck by the strategic significance of the small provincial town. Colonel Charles de Gaulle, a prominent theorist of tank warfare at the time, noted, "Letnitsa proved that in modern conflict, control over transport arteries is no less important than the capture of territory. A city located at the intersection of railways becomes a key point of the entire campaign." British experts were impressed by the scale of destruction that Polish engineering units managed to inflict on the transport infrastructure. Major General Percy Hobart wrote in his report, "We must revise our plans for the defense of key transport hubs. It is necessary to prepare mining schemes in advance so that in the event of a retreat, the enemy is deprived of the ability to use the captured infrastructure." Particular attention of Western analysts was drawn to methods of combating tank formations in urban environments. French Colonel Jean Estienne, having studied the tactics of Polish anti-tank groups, developed a new concept for the defense of transport hubs, providing for the creation of a multi-layered system of obstacles and firing points. Anglo-French specialists noted the critical role of aviation in the struggle for control over transport communications. Air Marshal Hugh Dowding emphasized, "The experience of Letnica shows that without reliable air cover, it is impossible to hold key transport facilities. Fighter aviation must be concentrated over strategically important hubs, even at the cost of weakening other sectors." The study of the logistical aspects of the battle led to a revision of the principles of supply organization. British Quartermaster General William Platt wrote, "We must create autonomous reserves of material means in the area of each significant transport hub. These reserves must provide the garrison with everything necessary for at least 2 weeks of intense fighting." French military theorists were amazed at the speed with which German engineering units restored the destroyed infrastructure. This led to the creation of special sabotage groups, whose task would be not only to destroy transport facilities, but also to organize constant interference with the enemy's restoration work. The analysis of the battles for Letnica had a significant impact on the planning of France's defense. General Alphonse Georges, commander of the Northeast Front, ordered the garrisons of all key transport hubs to be reinforced and mobile reserves to be created to support them. The British command, in turn, initiated a large-scale program to strengthen the transport infrastructure on the English Channel coast. The legacy of the Battle of Letnica extends far beyond a tactical episode of the Second World War. This clash became a true laboratory of modern military thought, where theory met harsh practice. Decades later, military academies worldwide continue to study this battle as a classic example of maneuver warfare and the struggle for transport communications. The first, and perhaps most important lesson of Letnica, is the critical role of transport hubs in modern conflict. Control over railway stations, highways, and bridges has a decisive impact on the course of an entire campaign. As the battle showed, even a small provincial town can acquire strategic importance if key transport arteries pass through it. The second fundamental lesson concerns flexibility in planning. The Polish command, faced with superior enemy forces, managed to transition from rigid defense to maneuver operations. This principle of adaptability became the cornerstone of modern military strategy. Rigid, inflexible plans inevitably fail when confronted with a dynamically changing environment. Letnica clearly demonstrated the importance of interbranch cooperation. Neither tanks, nor aviation, nor infantry could by themselves provide a decisive advantage. Only their coordinated actions led to success. The modern concept of joint operations is largely based on this experience. Of particular value are the lessons in organizing anti-tank defense. Polish units proved that even with limited resources, it is possible to effectively counter armored vehicles by cleverly using terrain, engineering barriers, and mobile fire teams. These tactical methods were subsequently adopted by many armies around the world. An unexpected but important lesson was the psychological component of maneuver warfare. The constantly changing front line, the absence of a clear rear, the need to quickly react to a changing situation, all this created an enormous psychological burden on soldiers and officers. Modern military training programs pay significant attention to psychological resilience precisely because of this experience. The Battle of Letnitsa forced a re-evaluation of approaches to logistical support. It became clear that in conditions of maneuver warfare, classical supply schemes through stationary bases are ineffective. They were replaced by the concept of mobile logistics groups capable of quickly moving behind combat formations. Another important lesson was the need for timely preparation of transport facilities for destruction. Polish engineers, who methodically destroyed key infrastructure before retreating, created serious problems for the German advance. This experience formed the basis of modern concepts of territorial defense. The legacy of Letnica continues to live on in modern military theory and practice. The principles of flexibility, interbranch cooperation, and the protection of critical infrastructure remain relevant today. Military conflicts of recent decades invariably confirm the correctness of the lessons learned from this dramatic episode of the beginning of the Second World War.